Last Friday, I had you research some invasive species. One of them was the cane toad. That's one that humans introduced to Australia. They were sent there to eat up some insects. And it turns out that they didn't really eat the insects. And then the poisons in the cane toad themselves were damaging to native species and became this huge human-caused disaster. Instead, I had you research the lionfish. One of the ways we try to curb the number of lionfish in the ecosystem is to create a demand for them. So there was a big PR campaign to tell people that, ooh, lionfish taste good. And so restaurants started putting them on the menu. Kudzu was another one. It doesn't have to be an animal. It could be an invasive plant. And so we've had kudzu take off all across the southeastern United States. It's all the way up into Indiana now, southern parts of Indiana. Carp were another very invasive fish. This is on the Wabash River, bordering Indiana. Look how aggressive these fish are. Crazy, right? Kind of cool. Except they have eaten up all the prey in the rivers. These guys can hop right up into the boat. Clips of that here. Oh, fun. I slowed this one down for you. I thought that was hilarious. Wow.
No, it's carp.
I just put that in because I think it's hilarious.
No, it's carp.
He goes to throw it back and instead throws it on the rocks.
No, it's carp.
This is it's a carp meme. If you really break down the definition of an invasive species, there is no worse invasive species than humans. Why do invasives become invasive? And it turns out there's two main characteristics here that allow them to become dominant. The first one is most invasive species tend to reproduce relatively quickly. And second, if there are predators in the new environment, they have strong defenses against them. College Board really wrote a nasty question, suggests 2 reasons that invasives are so successful. And a lot of kids wrote that invasive species do not have any natural predators in the new environment. And it turns out the College Board did not accept that answer because that's not a property of the species. That's a property of the community. The community did not have any natural predators. The species had strong defenses against potential. So there's a very nuanced separation there in that second point that I hope you're picking up on. Having defense is different than not having predators. Another clue for you if you're answering FRQs, if they ever ask you to solve a problem, like what are 2 ways we can solve this situation? One of the answers is almost always education. The first step is to let people know if they don't know that it's a problem. You have to educate people. You have to have campaigns which make people aware. There are a couple other ad campaigns. A few years ago, we had something called an emerald ash borer. And it's a little bug that would get into ash trees. And what we did to contain it was we went in and we cut down ash trees, removed them completely, physically removed them. When the emerald ash borer was doing its thing, there were big campaigns. Some places it's illegal to bring your own firewood into a park or a campsite. You had to only burn the wood that was provided there so that they knew you weren't moving bugs around. The Burmese python We think that that mainly became invasive in Florida because people had them as pets. And as the snakes got bigger and bigger, they realized, I don't really want this. And so they just let it go. They went out to the woods or the swamp and they turned it loose. That's about the most irresponsible thing you can do if you have an exotic pet, is to turn it loose in the wild. People who like boating and going from lake to lake to fish or to water ski or what have you, it's very important that you inspect your boats when you leave one lake and go to another. There are little critters that can attach to the hull of your boats. Most of the time they're called mussels. We've got a quagga mussel, we've got a zebra mussel. These guys will cling and end up in other freshwater sources and then rapidly multiply. Okay, so that's just a handful of methods of how we deal with these invasive species, how we can control them in some way. And each of these methods fits into one of the four categories, and they each have slight drawbacks. There are problems with each one. Biological is where we put another species in to kill it. We introduce a predator. So cane toads was a great example of that, and we've seen how that can go wrong. The cane toad can kill things we didn't want it to, and then it can become invasive itself. Rarely does biological work out for us. That's one humans have learned over the last 100 years. All it does is mess things up. Now, chemical is pretty effective, herbicides and pesticides. The problem is you're going to accidentally kill things you don't want to with the chemicals. There's a nasty garden chemical out there. It's banned in a lot of countries. Not the good old US though. It's called Roundup. They're trying to ban it in California because they know it's carcinogenic, cancer causing. And yet our laws here allow people to have it. I've used Roundup at my house. I wore a mask, I was safe. But I'll tell you, wherever you spray it, it's gonna kill everything. It'll take it back to bare dirt. So if you wanna get rid of some weeds, well, be ready for it to kill the grass and any other plants nearby as well. Physical. Okay, physical is probably the most challenging because you're never gonna stop them all. You can go out and weed the garden, but you know that the weeds are coming back. Physically removing or blocking an invasive species is rarely 100% effective. And finally, you can preach all you want and try to teach people, but especially in America, freedom. I'm not wearing a mask. You can't make me. You can't tell me what to do. So telling people not to move firewood, you know somebody's going to break the rules. Somebody doesn't care. Not my problem. And so you'll always have people who skirt the rules and don't play along. Symbiosis is when you have two organisms and they have some sort of close relationship, generally long-term. There's different kinds of symbiosis. It's not always good for both organisms. It could be a negative relationship. We've already learned about one, predator-prey, right? That relationship of up and down oscillation, that is symbiosis. Predation is one type of symbiosis. Competition, where the squirrels fighting against each other. That's not really predator-prey, but it's still symbiosis. We'll come back to competition later in the week. Parasitism. Just like predation, you have one organism that is typically harmed and one that benefits. Coronavirus is a parasite. It's a pathogen. Ticks, leeches. Now, in parasitism, they eventually do, in most cases, kill their host. But you understand why it's to their advantage to do that slowly, right? As soon as the host is dead, they have to find a new host. So that's one of the big differences between predation and parasitism, the speed at which the host is taken care of, removed. If you get bored, you need to Google zombie snail. The zombie snail is so crazy. It's the most ridiculous relationship I have ever heard of on this planet. Okay, next up we've got mutualism, another type of symbiosis. Now in symbiotic mutualism, both organisms benefit in some way. So here are some classic examples. We've got a bee and a flower. The bee gets nectar to make honey. The flower gets pollination. The clownfish's bright colors scare away predators. It gets habitat from the anemone. And the anemone can sting. But the sting does not hurt the clownfish. So both of them get protection against other predators, and both of them are happy coexisting. And then we've got birds living on an antelope. The birds are able to have a safe place on a larger organism. The birds eat ticks and bugs off of the antelope, and so both of them have a benefit. And finally, we've got commensalism. With commensalism, you have one organism that benefits, and the other organism is indifferent. It is not helped nor harmed. It just ignores the other organism. So we've got birds and trees, right? The tree doesn't care that the birds are there. The birds have a place for habitat. Tree orchids, they are flowers that grow on the trunks of trees. When rainwater washes down the trunk, it provides the nutrients that the flowers need. And on the left, you see a cane toad that is hitched a ride on a big old constrictor. It's got pretty good grip there. The snake does not seem to mind one bit, and the toad gets a free bus pass.